Hello there. This video is about the proposed return of the grammar school, and I've got a hard copy in front of me here, so if I keep looking down, it's just to make sure I'm not missing anything out. Oh. I passed the 11 plus and went to a grammar school in the 1950s, and then I taught in a secondary modern school, and which eventually became a comprehensive, and I was there for more than 30 years, so I'm pretty familiar with all systems. The grammar school I went to, like most grammar schools, was a three-form entry. There was an A, a B and C forms, and they were streamed. So the brightest kids went into the A form. The C class, the C form, they lost out almost from the start. Shortly after starting, they did general science and woodwork rather than the three separate sciences and Latin. And because of this, there was absolutely no chance of moving from the C stream or the C form into the B form or A form. In other words, you were trapped there. I mean, one of the arguments being put forward in favour of the return of grammar schools is that it will give those bright but disadvantaged pupils a chance to escape that sort of deprivation. But that wasn't my experience, and it's not been supported by research which has come later. Many of the pupils at the grammar school I went to came from what were impoverished backgrounds, from grim towns surrounded by steelworks and chemical works. And whilst a few of them with aspirational parents succeeded at grammar school, my memory is that most of them left grammar school at 16, having failed most of their GCE examinations. I mean, they had the ability, but they didn't have the aptitude, and they didn't have the home support required. Statistics suggest that only 4 of the 10 pupils from deprived backgrounds in each grammar school year, I mean that's only 1 in every 100 pupils in the year as a whole, make it into the sixth form and then go on to university and have successful careers. But at what cost to the other 400 pupils who were consigned to a second-class education? Is that a reason for bringing grammar schools back? Well, I don't think so. The one pupil who was slightly above me in grammar school, from that background, who made any big success at all, became that very famous magician. But it had absolutely nothing to do with the fact he went to a grammar school. Whilst the system for selection under the new proposals is still very vague, it's been proposed that there will be a quota system for entry into grammar schools by disadvantaged pupils. I mean, disadvantaged means those pupils who are on free school meals. And how will that be done? How will they decide? Will these pupils have a lower pass mark to get through the 11 plus? I mean, how will parents of those pupils who have performed better at the same primary school, how will they feel about this when their children fail the 11 plus, having had to get a higher pass mark? I think this system is more divisive even than the old system. I mean, how will it be decided whether a town will get a grammar school? Will it be a case of a straight majority in a poll where the number of returns is small and likely to be from those whose children are likely to pass the entrance examination? Another proposal is that rather than the crude and final decisions being made at 11, as they were in the old days, there will be further opportunities to enter the grammar school at age 14 and 16. I mean, that's 3 opportunities for a few to succeed, but 3 opportunities for even more to fail. I mean, what cost to the esteem of a youngster if they fail twice or even 3 times to get into the grammar school? How many spaces will there be for children who pass at 14? In the 1950s and 60s, there was a similar system. It was called a 13 plus, I remember. And in my second year at the grammar school, only a miserly 4 boys from over 200 who were in secondary modern schools arrived at the grammar school having passed this exam, this 13 plus exam. Now they'd missed a year, having been at a secondary modern school, so they were behind in every academic subject. And because they hadn't studied French in their secondary moderns, they were immediately put into the C stream. Again, doing woodwork and general science. Hardly subjects for a grammar school. I mean, how many children today, if they passed a 14 plus examination or a 16 plus examination to get into grammar school, having been at a secondary modern, I mean, how many of them would be able to hold their own with those who had been at a grammar school since the age of 11? I mean, it would require an heroic effort on their part, and only with tremendous support. I mean, the idea is it's just a complete sop to those who rightly complain about the 11 plus. It's meaningless. In the North Riding of Yorkshire, in the 1950s and 60s, only 20% of pupils were allowed to pass the 11 plus in any one year, because that provided enough pupils to fill the grammar school. The other 80%, that's 8 out of 10, went to secondary moderns. Now, the policy of the Education Committee in the North Riding, especially the Chief Education Officer, who was a bit of a tyrant, was that pupils in secondary moderns were incapable of taking any external examinations. Any talk of entering secondary modern pupils for external examinations was regarded almost as treason, and it was firmly knocked on the head. I mean, any head teacher in the North Riding at that time, if they made such a suggestion, they were reminded in no uncertain terms that their future careers within the North Riding were very much in jeopardy. They were putting their careers on the line. Anyway, one young headmaster of a secondary modern school, he stuck his neck out and he challenged this chairman, and it didn't go down very well. But in 1963, with the support of his governors, and more importantly with the support of the parents of children in the school, a small number of pupils were entered for a limited number of GCE examinations, and they started studying for them when they were in the fourth year. That would be the year they normally left school, so they had to stay on for an extra year to do these GCE examinations. And the results confounded absolutely everybody, except of course the headmaster, who knew what they were capable of. He wasn't confounded by this at all. I mean, most of the children passed their GCE. But most confounded of all were the officers from the local authority, the North Riding. And they used all kinds of fallacious excuses to try and explain this away. Put the 11 plus division of pupils into two groups. 20% who were capable of an academic education, and the 80% who were not. I mean, it was just shown to be a complete and utter sham, and it had been going on for years and years and years. What a waste of talent that was. Anyway, in 1965, the North Riding decided to introduce comprehensive education right across the county. But there were two pockets of resistance. One was Ripon and the other was Skipton. And powerful groups of parents in both of these towns, they sort of blocked the comprehensivisation of schools at every single turn. And it dragged on for weeks, if not months and months. And there was a change in the national government. The Conservatives were elected, and there was a change of the rules. So Ripon and Skipton retained their grammar schools, and they still have them to this day, 2016. I mean, such was the reputation of the secondary modern school in Ripon that large numbers of parents living in the town, they either decided they weren't going to put their children in for the 11 plus, or if they did and they failed, they certainly weren't going to send them there. So there was a sort of mass movement of children every morning from Ripon across into Harrogate and Pateley Bridge comprehensive schools. I mean, Ripon Secondary Modern became a failing school, and at one time 30% of the children had special educational needs. There was a similar situation in Skipton. Skipton Secondary Modern was called Airville College, and it's been in special measures twice in the last 10 years, having failed its Ofsted report. I mean, in 2013, Ofsted, and I must say I'm not a fan of Ofsted, but they reported that the school was inadequate, in other words, failing miserably in leadership and management, achievement of pupils, and quality of teaching. The school, Airville College, I think it's changed its name now. It's now an academy, and it's now under new management, so it'd be interesting to see what happens to it. Now, several local authorities have retained grammar schools. I mean, Kent being one such authority. I mean, whilst there's no doubt that the 20% of pupils in Kent grammar schools do slightly better than their peers in comprehensives elsewhere, there is a downside to that. The other 80% in secondary moderns, they do slightly worse than their peers in comprehensive schools in other areas. I mean, taken as a whole, Kent pupils do no better than comparable pupils in comprehensives elsewhere. Indeed, Kent has some of the worst secondary schools in the country. I mean, Peter Hitchens of the Mail, please note from your article on the 11th of September. So given all of that, why would parents want to bring back grammar schools? There have been various polls in newspapers and in the media about parental support for grammar schools. The Telegraph on the 6th of August, it reported 70% of parents were in favour of grammar schools. Now, this was backed by the Sun and the Mail. I mean, one Conservative MP gave an even higher figure of 75% of parents being in favour of grammar schools. I mean, how were these figures arrived at, considering that 80% of pupils won't even get into grammar schools? I mean, these figures are just absolute nonsense. You make them up. A more realistic figure came from a YouGov poll on the 18th of August, and it came out with a figure of 38%. Now that strikes me as being quite reasonable. I mean, the important question for me is, why do we need to educate pupils with different abilities in separate institutions? Why do we need separate schools just because you've got you're brighter or less bright? I've never been able to grasp that. Why can't all children just be taught in one school? They do it at primary schools. All children go to the same school at primary school. There isn't a problem with that. You don't have primary schools for the less able and other primary schools for the more able. I mean, what happens when they get to 11 that makes that necessary? I've asked many sort of pro-grammar school pundits and others this question. Not only have I not received a reasoned argument against it, I haven't had any response whatsoever. I mean, I sent one of these hard copies to the Secretary of State for Education, and I also sent one to my local MP here in Richmond, and neither of them have had the decency to even send an acknowledgement, let alone some kind of reasoned argument in favour of grammar schools or against grammar schools. That says a lot to me. Most of our competitors in the world, especially in the Far East, they don't have selective education. And they are absolutely, well, they're almost out of sight when it comes to success of their children in sort of wealth creating subjects, the sort of maths and sciences and information technology. In 2012, an organisation called the Programme for International Assessment, which is PISA. Education is full of such jargon, but anyway. They set examinations right across the world and analysed the results of of the children in secondary education, that is. And in 2012, the United Kingdom was 26th out of all the countries in the world for 15-year-old pupils' educational achievements. I mean, that was down 2 places from the previous one. And there's another report due out this year, 2016. It'll be interesting to see where we fit there. The problem with the editing suite on this camera is that it will only build up a file of 4 gigs. So anything more than that, it divides into 2. So this is the end of part 1 of the video Return to Grammar Schools.